Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, the weather outside is absolutely atrocious. We've got a big old storm blowing through. It's caused a little bit of damage to some of the plants I've put out, but as usual, I've got some spares I can use to replace them. And that's always a good idea. And I try to have spares at pretty much every stage of production. So whether I'm starting in a seed tray or some cells, I will have more plants than I need. I will then prick out and pot on more than I need, and then I'll keep a few back after planting out in case something happens to them. Sorry, this might be a little bit noisy. It really is a gale out there. So that at every opportunity, if something goes wrong, then I've got a replacement plant I can use. And that policy is going to serve us well when I get out here next week and survey the damage that has been done to some of our plants. So anyway, I'm not gardening out there today. I might do a bit of weeding, but I'm not doing anything else in this weather. So I'm undercover and I'm going to take a look at the sweet corn. Now we've got two crops of sweet corn on the way. We've got the Swift that I sowed some weeks back, and that's pretty much ready for planting, I think. I'm going to take a look at that, just check that it is ready, and then lay out in here where I'm going to plant. And then we've got the golden Bantam that we sowed recently. That's starting to germinate. Sorry, there's a low-flying aircraft. Well, there's all sorts of noise going on today. And also, some of our beans are starting to make an appearance. So this is one of the open pollinated corns. This is golden Bantam. We've got pretty good germination through here. And I dare say these other cells might show up soon. Well, yeah, there's one just coming through. So in a few weeks' time, these are going to be ready to plant out. The beans are going mad in here, pushing up all the soil and generally making a bit of a mess. But again, we've got good germination here, and I will start to go through and thin these out to just 2 per station as soon as they're, well, maybe an inch or 2 higher. These are not cabbages. What are these? That's borlotti and chevrier beans. Well, the borlotti beans are just coming through here as well. So that's not too bad. No sign of anything from the chevrier, but I'm sure they will follow. So I'm quite happy with all of that. I've got to get that out of the way now. So here are the Swift plants, and these are quite good looking plants. I'm just going to pop one of these up. It should come out reasonably well. I just want to see what state the roots are in. Wow, I think that's pretty good. It's certainly not bound up in this cell. I think these are absolutely fine. They'd probably be okay here for another week, but I think I'm going to plant those out. For our first crop of sweet corn, we do like to set them out in the polytunnel. Now, in our previous garden, we had a much bigger tunnel and we could plant lots of corn in there. This one's a little bit smaller. I'm hoping to cram in 16 plants. I'm going to look at the spacing in a minute and lay that out, see whether I can get that many in. It might only be 12. Now, the spacing for corn, if you want good sized cobs, you should leave plenty of room between the plants. But over the years, I've grown plenty of corn here with a fairly tight spacing. I've often put 4 plants across a 4-foot wide bed when probably only 3 would be sensible. And they've always done reasonably well. You can never really rely on getting 2 cobs per plant. I'm looking for 1 good cob per plant. Some plants will give me the second cob, but of course if you're if you're packing them in, you're less likely, I think, to get the larger harvest. But on the other hand, if I get 16 plants in here and get 16 good sized full cobs, I'm going to be pretty pleased. And we usually do get a pretty good crop of sweet corn. So well, I've got to be a little bit careful with the placement of these plants. I don't know how this is going to work out. In our previous tunnel, we had a large bed down the center, and then things like tomatoes and peppers were planted on the sides in the borders, and there were paths between them. And that meant that the corn never got in the way of anything else. That's not the case here. I've got to be able to squeeze between the corn and the tomatoes in order to tend the tomatoes. So I don't know how this is going to work out. It's going to be interesting. I've just been marking this out with some little offcuts of bamboo, and I've got these spaced at probably 15 to 16 inches apart. Now I know that spacing will work from before. That's quite similar to spacings I've used in the past, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm just a little bit worried about how it's going to grow in here and whether I'm still going to be able to get to my tomatoes. The tomatoes aren't going to care too much. They're still going to get good light from the morning and afternoon sun, so I'm not worried about affecting their growing conditions too much. But anyway, I've got a 4x4 block marked out here, and I think I'm going to go for it. The first job though is to just hoe off a few of these weeds. Now these are showing up particularly along the track of the soaker hose, which isn't surprising, but I'll hoe those off now, and then once the corn gets going, I'm sure it will outcompete these little fellas. I should have done this before the soaker hose came on, and this soil would be a little nicer. So sweet corn are pretty greedy fellas. You can add some extra feed here, but this has had a ton of horse compost when we were preparing it, so I think it will be fine. So I'm just going to drop each one of those in. Yeah, these are really nice plants. I'm quite happy with them. They've got some nice roots on them. It'll just be interesting to see how they grow here in the tunnel. So I've set out the 16 plants, and that leaves me with a few spares, which is always nice. Now I've actually shut the soaker hose right down for the next few days. It's quite warm in here, but I don't think we're going to be seeing the sun for a couple of days, so I've shut that down. And our soil varies quite a lot in different parts of the garden. Even, you know, just a few yards apart, the soil can be quite different. There are one or two places where there's some clay in the soil. There are seams of larger stones in different places, and this part of the garden has a lot more silt in it. So this here that might look a little bit clay-like, it's moldable as clay would be, but as soon as you try to deform it, it crumbles. That is silt particles, but it makes the soil a little bit sticky, not like clay, but something like that. So that's why this soil at the moment, because the soaker hose was on recently, it's a little bit claggy. So I've wound that hose, that timer, right back, so it's not going to be watering much for the next couple of days. But even though there's plenty of moisture in the soil, I still want to water these in, because I really want to make sure that there's soil around those roots and that I haven't got left big air pockets down in these planting holes. It'll be interesting to see how this develops in here, and whether this is a good idea or I've just made a complete mess of it. I'm hoping it doesn't get too out of hand. It's a little bit silly. I've got two experiments going on this year. One is trying the corn in this space. The other is that I have very little experience with hybrid corn, and in the past the only one I've grown is lark. It's always done really well, and this year I'm trying Swift just for a change, and maybe one experiment at a time would have been slightly more sensible. So far I think the Swift is okay. I have a feeling that the lark plants, when they're younger, might be a little bit more robust than these. I was expecting something a little bit more chunky, but they look healthy enough. And as I say, I've got spares in case one or two of these refuse to get on in this spot. I don't see why they should, but you never know. Anyway, that is all for this video from a very stormy garden. Thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.